My brother told me it was going to be good. And he was right. I had to include that in there because months ago we were talking about this movie and he said, it's going to be good. Mark my words, make a note, and say it when you film your review. So I did. Can't believe I remembered to do that. Oh my gosh. Okay, Frankenstein. Guillermo del Toro has been working on this movie or has been wanting to make this movie for 25 plus years, and it is finally here. As of the recording of this, which is the 18th of October, it has a limited run, so it might be in your area, might not, but this coming weekend, next weekend, it's supposed to be wide, and it'll be on the big screen for about 2 weeks, I think, and then it's going to hit Netflix. So you'll be able to see it then if you can't get out to watch it on the big screen, but I highly encourage checking this movie out at the theater. It deserves a big screen viewing experience. So the other day I did a quick reaction/review video for the Latino Slant about this movie. Now I'm going to go into more depth as far as my thoughts on this film. As I said, it was directed by Guillermo del Toro. He also wrote it. It's his adaptation or his version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It is fairly faithful to the source material, and I think I'll touch on that at different points along the way. Jacob Elordi is the creature. Oscar Isaac is Victor Frankenstein. Mia Goth plays Elizabeth, and Christoph Waltz is like a sponsor. He's Elizabeth's uncle. It's told in 3 parts. Part 1 was called The Prelude, and it basically starts in the Arctic. There is a ship that is stuck in the ice, and while the people are trying to get it unstuck from the ice, they see an explosion in the distance. They rush there to the site of the explosion, and they see a wounded Victor Frankenstein. They don't know who he is. They bring him on board the ship. Shortly after they bring him on the ship, the creature starts to attack the group. And it becomes very clear that this creature is immensely powerful and unkillable. And from that point, Victor starts to tell his story. Then we have what's officially part 1, which is Victor's tale. And it's basically his origin story. It starts from when he's younger, like, I don't know, maybe a tween or preteen or very, very young teen, and shows the birth of his brother, the death of his mother, and as his life progresses beyond that point, delving into when he's like in medical school and has these ideas of cheating death. His whole thing about cheating death or wanting to bring the dead to life or whatever, it's rooted in his childhood because of what happened to his mother. So we get a really good foundation for why he is the way he is, why he thinks the way he does. Then there's another timeline shift. It's still within the part 1, Victor's tale, 1855, which is 2 years before the Prelude takes place. The Prelude's 1857. I forgot to mention that. And in 1855 is when he begins his exploration of this whole thing that he wants to do in earnest. He meets Christoph Waltz, who wants to be his sponsor. This gentleman is actually the uncle of the character played by Mia Goth, who is going to be marrying Victor's younger brother. From that point, his experimentation continues. He sets up his lab in this old abandoned tower, and it shows how all of that is put together. The storytelling goes back and forth between Victor talking to the captain of this ship and then going back and building a little bit more on the story as he runs the experiments and when he eventually brings this creature to life, and then all of the things that happen as a result of that. After that point, there is a shift in the narrative, and then we come to part 2, which is the creature's tale. And then the creature tells his version of events, basically. And then everything culminates to the conclusion on the ship, basically. There was a lot to like about this film. It was not perfect to me. As I mentioned in my Out of the Theater reaction, it's no Pan's Labyrinth, which I would definitely rate higher, but this is still a solid movie. I do recommend it if you haven't gathered that by now. Some stuff that I really liked was the set design, and I like the costuming. I really like the hat Victor wore. I liked the dialogue. There were some touches of humor sprinkled throughout. It was nothing that was a huge knee slapper or anything like that, but just little tiny moments of humor in some of the dialogue that caused a laugh among the audience. Some other stuff I liked. The special effects for the most part, were very good. Or the visual effects. Let's say when it's showing him run his experiments and he's cutting up body parts, that was so gruesome, but it was done very well. Some other stuff that was a little unsettling was when he was picking out specimens for what he was going to do. He was examining people that were getting ready to be executed. Oh, I don't know, that just added a whole level of ugh. There is a very long buildup before the creature is animated. It's probably at least an hour or more. So we get a huge backstory and character development setup for Victor Frankenstein, and we see the flaws in his character, which become more evident after the creature is animated. He meets his brother's fiancée, and you can tell right away that there's some sparks going on, sort of on both of their parts, but more so on Victor's. And that is one thing that has been changed from the book. Their relationship in the book is quite different from the relationship that they have in here. Elizabeth comes across as someone who's a bit challenging to Victor. She's not your traditional female of the time. She's odd, she's eccentric, but she has a very tender heart and a wise nature. That's kind of a challenge to Victor. And so you can see these potential issues in their relationship. And by issues, I'm referring to the fact that she is supposed to marry Victor's brother. That was another problem with Victor's character. Why is he making moves on this woman when she's supposed to be marrying his brother? I know this is a thing that happens. Okay, I get it. But this is just another layer of Victor that we see that presents him as a highly flawed person. Makes him interesting, but as the film goes on, he is very clearly established as the villain of the story. He's manipulative. He is also irresponsible. Once he brings the creature to life, he is so repulsed by it. This was accurate to the book, but he is so repulsed by what he has created and he doesn't know what to do with it. So there are themes of rejection, abuse, abandonment. He is abusive to the creature. You feel very sorry for this thing that is very simple-minded, but he's like a little baby, right? He's just been born. He doesn't know anything. And Victor is not a very patient parent. He has created this child and he doesn't want to be a parent to this child. He doesn't want to help this child learn how to navigate the world, to be something that can learn and grow and be something beyond what he is, having just been animated. And so he's very impatient with this creature. And like I said, abusive. The way Victor is presented in this film is definitely a diversion from how he's presented in the original source material. He is presented as the way that I have mentioned, but it's less so. He is more indecisive and just makes bad choices, but isn't necessarily, I don't know, presented in the same negative light that he is in this film. And the creature is portrayed as a complete victim, a complete innocent. There is nothing morally gray about what this creature does. This is in contrast to the way he's presented in the book. In the book, he is a sympathetic character. There are things that he does in the book that's not gray territory at all. It's very clearly bad, some of the stuff that he does. That is not the case in this movie. He is presented as the good and Victor is the bad. As the movie progresses and the creature starts to become more self-aware and he becomes more intelligent and he learns how to read and he can talk. I mean, he becomes quite loquacious, let me tell you. You see he's trying to find his place in the world, and he still has this very deep longing for affection and human companionship. Throughout this telling of the horror classic, Del Toro doesn't really lean so much into the horror part of it. It feels more like an emotional drama than a traditional horror story. That's kind of how Pan's Labyrinth felt too. It's just like your typical Del Toro, very nuanced aspects of people and situations and stories, and giving all of that to us in this beautifully crafted world with this lovely set design and costuming. I also did like the design of the creature. Some people might feel like he's not being faithful to the original, but by that they're referring to the 1931 movie starring Boris Karloff, but that was wildly unfaithful to the source material, especially with regard to the creature design. Here, his creature design feels more organic, stitched up pieces of body parts. However, I felt that he still looked too pretty and clean, given what he was supposed to be. He's supposed to be grotesque looking, and he just looked like Jacob Elordi with scars drawn all over his body. Speaking of Jacob, he did fine in here. I was impressed with his physicality. And by that I mean, number one, he's super tall. I did not realize how tall he was until I saw this movie. I mentioned in my other video that I had initially thought they were tricks of the camera, you know, like how they did with the Hobbits and Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. Maybe some of that was going on, but Elordi is just very, very tall. I think he's like 6'5", so he's super tall. He had a lot of scenes where he's like chained up in this basement and he's scuttling around on hands and feet. And so very physical role, very physically demanding role. And he had to also act like he was a baby half the time. I mean, in the beginning, he couldn't hardly do anything. He couldn't walk very well. He couldn't speak. He could only say one word. That was Victor's name. That drove Victor crazy. So I don't really have many complaints about his performance. The only thing was, as the creature grew more knowledgeable and more able to express himself, it started to feel a little less convincing. I don't know, maybe it was just the dialogue he was saying. Somehow it just felt like this big mismatch between what he was saying and what he was supposed to be. Maybe that was the whole point of it, because I know that he does become quite intelligent in the book. He can read, he can communicate very well. He was extremely strong. However, I was confused as to why in some instances he didn't seem to be as strong as he was in other instances where bullets could hardly stop him, but then earlier they could knock him out and seemingly kill him, whatever. Maybe that was just because he hadn't fully realized his power. I don't know. Not a huge complaint, just something that I noticed. And because the creature is portrayed as such a sympathetic character and Dr. Frankenstein such a villain, you do find yourself as an audience member rooting for the creature more than Victor. If I had other criticisms, it would be pretty minor things like the casting of young Victor. That part of his story takes place over many years. Yet that kid didn't seem to age at all. I noticed that. It does not break the story, but it's something you can't help but register in your mind. When you're first introduced to him, he's quite young. And then several years later, let's say 5 to 7 or so years later, he looks exactly the same. And you know he would have gone through dramatic changes because he would have been through puberty at that point and beyond. So, you know, the CGI. The CGI in Pan's Labyrinth was better. And the reason it was so noticeably off in this film is because the CGI was used, well, what CGI you could notice was being used was like on animals. They just haven't really fully mastered that in a lot of ways, and you could really tell that here. That definitely jumped out at me as something that probably could have been a little better, or maybe just use real animals. I don't know. There was also a situation where in this tower that Victor works, there's this huge hole in the middle of the room, and it was built that way on purpose. It wasn't like it was just some damage or something. As soon as I saw that hole, I knew someone was going to end up falling down that hole, and sure enough, because that was so glaringly apparent, it seems to me that maybe having them put some sort of protection or screen or plank or whatever over top that hole to prevent accidents would have come across as more believable. And maybe like if something damaged this protective barrier and then someone, okay, right. But the fact that they put nothing over this hole, maybe it's just me and my fear of heights, but there's no way I'd be walking around with a hole that big in the middle of the floor and I'm that high up. Yeah, no. Then when the creature is getting ready to be animated, there is this terrible storm and Victor has to crawl up on top of this tower to put lightning rods. Why didn't he just put those rods up there before he was even getting ready to start with this animation process. This just felt like something tacked on for purposes of drama and tension and thrills and all that. But I felt a little manipulated by that. Maybe that's something in the original story that I'm just not connecting. Maybe he can't put the rods up until the storm starts, whatever, but that feels a little bit thin to me. The part of the movie that delves into the creature's backstory, that doesn't happen until there is less than an hour to go in the story. And that particular part, for some reason, felt rushed compared to how much the movie took its time with all of the other stuff leading up until that point. It just felt a little bit compressed. I think I would have liked a little bit more breathing room for some of those parts, but this film is long already, so I'm not sure how much more really I would have liked, to be honest. Maybe if they'd shaved a little bit off of Victor's part of the story and added a little bit more to the creatures, it would have felt more balanced. Another thing that didn't sit completely well with me was the almost romantic infatuation that the character of Elizabeth had towards the creature. Now, in some ways, I could understand her being drawn to this creature, but at other times, especially during a scene later on, it felt a little bit like too much of a reach for me to buy into. It just felt very odd, and it did not land with me, like, at all. In addition to the predictable issue of someone falling down the hole, there was another issue that happened where a person was shot, and it was very evident that this was going to happen, though the audience seemed to act like they had no idea it was going to be a thing, and when it did, there was so much gasping. But I could see it happening from a mile away, but the way that scene played out also felt very clunky. I know an easy fix that would have made that flow so much better, but I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to give too much away, but maybe when you see this moment, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Having said all of that, this film overall is quite impressive. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, but I think it is a worthwhile, emotionally compelling adaptation of Mary Shelley's book. It is better, in my opinion, than some of his other stuff, like The Shape of Water and maybe Pinocchio. And I do think it's a shame that it's not going to be in theaters for longer than it is. This is really something that deserves a nice long run on the big screen. I think that this is a fresh take on Frankenstein while staying pretty faithful to the original source. And it's got that emotional weight and moral complexity that Del Toro is quite good at delivering to us. I think if you are fans of Del Toro, if you're fans of Gothic horror or classic literature horror, you will probably really enjoy this. I would be surprised if you walked away from it outright hating it. I did not hate it, though I wasn't 100% in love with it. It was still a very worthwhile viewing experience and one that I absolutely do not regret being able to take part in. So those are my thoughts on Frankenstein. If you guys watch it, please go watch it. Let me know your thoughts. All right, you guys, that's it for this one. Nos vemos.